Hello and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Olumide Macaulay. The headlines. Explosions seen over Kyiv, morning skies, and Russian missile strikes. Wagner chief says group's fighters starting to get ammunition. Plus, the Kremlin says marking Victory Day on May the 9th today is sacred for many in Ukraine despite Zelensky's bill. Thank you so much for joining us. The conflict continues as fresh smoke trails from explosions could be seen over the skies of Kyiv at dawn after Ukrainian officials said Russia had launched a barrage of about 15 cruise missiles on the capital this morning. Officials say that local air defense systems had managed to shoot all of the Russian missiles down. Today's attacks, the 5th in May, comes a day after Russia launched its biggest drone swarm yet in a renewed air campaign unleashed 10 days ago after a lull since early March. The attack also came on Russia's Victory Day, one of its most commemorated public holidays, marking the anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945. A 3-day curfew in the Ukrainian city of Kherson ended early on Monday after another night of explosions. The local military administration had introduced the curfew as a safety measure, saying shelling from the Russian-controlled territory across the Dnipro River had increased. Russian fire wounded 8 people, including a 9-year-old boy, in 2 villages in the region. They were hurt in the Antonivka on Kherson's outskirts. Ukrainian troops recaptured the city last November after nearly 8 months of occupation by Russian troops, who seized it soon after launching their full-scale invasion. The area now comes under frequent artillery fire from Russian forces dug in on the opposite side of the Dnipro River. The head of Russia's mercenary Wagner group says his troops have started to receive the ammunition they need and reported heavy fighting in the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. In an audio message posted online, he claims the groups advanced a maximum of 130 meters amidst fierce fighting, but the groups are continuing to advance. Meanwhile, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen had arrived in Ukraine and will meet the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky today, which is Europe Day. The visit reaffirms the EU's unwavering support towards the country, in their words, a spokesperson of the European Commission has said. The meeting comes a day after Russia launched its biggest wave of drone strikes on Ukraine in months. Another day, Russia celebrates Victory Day, a holiday marking the defeat of Nazi Germany.
Tomorrow, the president will be in Kyiv, Ukraine, where she will meet President Volodymyr Zelensky and reaffirm the EU's unwavering support towards the country. As you will, of course, have noticed, this visit will take place on Europe Day. In this context, we warmly welcome the announcement by President Zelensky that the 9th of May will from now on also be celebrated as Europe Day in Ukraine.
Now, the Kremlin in Russia says marking Victory Day on May the 9th is still sacred for many people in Ukraine. The statement came after the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, said he had submitted a bill to the parliament officials marking May 8th a day of remembrance and victory, while May 9th, when Russia marks Victory Day, will become Europe Day. Asked about Zelensky's plan at a daily news briefing, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said in his words, there are veterans there too who took part in the Great Patriotic War, and their relatives for whom this day is and will remain sacred. For Russia, May the 9th is one of its most important national events, a remembrance of the enormous sacrifices made by the Soviet Union in defeating Nazi Germany. Soviet Russia and Soviet Ukraine sustained appalling loss of life in the war. The Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte says he will lay out the need to defend Ukraine in the war with Russia today when he meets the Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who's been critical of arming the Ukrainians. Now, he says he will explain to Lula why the question of supporting Ukraine is existential for the Netherlands, for Europe, and beyond, because the Russian invasion has put Western values at stake. President Lula, who's tried to encourage countries who are not involved in the conflict to form a group to push for peace talks, has said that supplying arms to Ukraine was encouraging the war. Now, the US government accused him of parroting Russia and Chinese propaganda. The Dutch government is considering donating F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine with its European partners. He's on a 3-day visit accompanied by a business delegation for talks focusing on trade and cooperation for sustainable agriculture in the energy transition, especially hydrogen.
Putin would be successful in Kyiv, in Ukraine. And I don't think he will. But let's assume for a moment that he might be successful. Again, I don't predict it. I think he will not be successful. But if he still will be successful, it won't end there. So it is also existential for our own safety, for our own security. And people are worried. In Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, in Berlin, in Paris, in Europe, are worried about what is happening in Ukraine.
Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, Ukraine's largest steel producer, the name of the company is ArcelorMittal, says it has told employees to take Tuesday, that's today, off or work remotely because of the threat of Russian air raids. Now, the company, which employs about 20,000 people, is located in the central city where President Vladimir Zelensky's hometown is, and has often seen, or rather been, the target of Russian drone and missile attacks. A spokesperson says the measure reflected the escalation of the enemy attacks nationwide and the downing of a reconnaissance drone on Saturday. Moscow had intensified air raids this month as Ukraine prepares to launch a counteroffensive against Russia's invasion. It has also promised to retaliate after blaming Kyiv for an apparent drone attack in the Moscow's Kremlin citadel, for which Ukraine has denied responsibility. Now, Italy says it strongly recommends any of its citizens still in Ukraine to leave the country by any means necessary. The country's foreign minister issued an alert in the wave of even heavier missile attacks on Kyiv and across all Ukrainian territory. This comes in the wake of Russia's biggest swarm of drone attacks for months against Ukraine on Monday. Now let's speak to Deputy Head of Foreign Desk, Pravda newspaper, Bratislava, Slovakia, Andrej Matisek. He speaks to us online from Slovakia. You're welcome to the program this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Could we begin with the recent attacks this morning by Russia involving the kamikaze drones purportedly Iranian-made? Now, this is obvious. Is this in a symbolic attack, as it were, because of today being Victory Day in Russia to mark the Soviet Union's defeat of Germany in World War II?
I think at least partly it is a bit of a symbolic from the Russian side to showing that, of course, we have means to attack the enemy. If I can say this word, of course, the Russia is the aggressor here, 100%. But yes, I think that Russia and General Staff and Kremlin, Vladimir Putin, they want to show to the population that they are trying to, as I said, to destroy and attack the enemy, which is, of course, very unfortunate because the war is going on, or invasion is going on, the Russian invasion is going on for more than 1 year, and there are no signs on the Russian side that they are willing to enter any meaningful negotiations.
Mr. Matisek, we know the pride with which Russia holds their campaign against Nazi Germany during the World War. We only have to look as far as the casualties that the Red Army, the Russian army as it was called, suffered we understand, in the neighborhood of maybe even 6 million people, mostly conscripts. And obviously, it's something that the Russian people or the Russian government takes extreme pride in. And in the same breath, Ukraine now declares today, the Russian Victory Day, Ukraine now calls it the Europe Day. Is this helpful?
Look, there is a Europe Day all over the European Union countries, May 9th. In fact, we are celebrating or remembering the Victory Day on May 9th, not on May 9th, but on May 8th, in my country, for example. And in a way, I understand that Ukraine want to be closer to the European partners, to the Western partners who are helping them, who are helping Ukraine to fight the Russian aggression. If it is helpful, maybe it's not helpful, but I think it is 100% understandable. And again, in whole of the Europe, the Day of Victory is celebrated on May 8th, not on May 9th as in Russia, because of the also because of the different time zones in 1945 when the ceasefire was declared or the peace was declared more than 70 years ago. So I think that this is just Ukraine showing that they want to be closer to their Western partners. And one thing must be said here. I think it is very possible to remember and to be grateful to the liberators who were also liberating my country in 1945. It was the Soviet Union army. I wouldn't call it definitely not Russian army because there were, of course, a lot of different people there. One of the biggest casualties of this, where we can trace to Belarus, for example, also to Ukraine. So I think that Russia is using this occasion for many years and also labeling their enemies as Nazis because it's very easy. Everybody hates Nazis. So if somebody is enemy of the Putin's regime, automatically he's a Nazi. And what we do with Nazis, we destroy Nazis. So unfortunately, we can say the sacred day of victory against German Nazi regime is also misused by propaganda from the Russian side.
Do you think, finally on that topic, do you think that, on that perspective, do you think that Russia will, or Putin will be thinking that in some sort of way that the world isn't grateful for the sacrifices that the Soviet Union made concerning the Victory Day?
Look, of course, he's using this argument that the Western countries are promoting Russophobia, and yes, I would admit that some of our how we react, some of our reactions on the Russian invasion might be a bit over the top, just getting rid of everything Russian, might be not really helpful, but it's very hard to. It's as I said, I think that the problem is that Russia is using this sacred day for their own political purposes. I think it's very possible to be grateful and to remember all the soldiers who were helping liberating Europe during the Second World War, again, including my country, but also on the other hand, being very clear on the fact that Russia is waging an illegal war against Ukraine. So if President Putin, Mr. Putin might complain about how ungrateful the Europe is or the West is, I think he should first of all look into the mirror and think about why it is happening. It is happening because Russia is waging a war.
This subject won't go away. I wanted to go to another perspective, but the president of Armenia, the president of Kazakhstan, the leaders of both countries are expected to be standing in solidarity with Russia today in their Victory Day parade. Your thoughts on that?
Look, those countries are neighboring countries with still a very, very close ties to Russia. So it is not such a big surprise that those leaders are there. On the other hand, also it must be said, Armenia is complaining about the role of Russia is playing in Armenia because of the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. Russia should play a peacekeeper role. It seems that Russia is not paying too much attention to it, and the tensions between Baku and Yerevan are rising. The same with Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is playing a very, I would say, very balanced game from the beginning of the invasion, because some of the Russian politicians are also claiming that after Ukraine we should go to Kazakhstan because there is a Russian minority there. And of course, this is a political issue for the Kazakh government. So on one hand, those leaders from the let's say post-Soviet, I don't like the term, but we can use it. Some of the post-Soviet countries are there, but I think that they are there. First of all, most of them they are there first of all for some pragmatic reasons, not for the love of Putin.
Now, the Prime Minister of Netherlands has made no bones about their support of the Dutch for Ukraine. But in his meeting, President Lula da Silva of Brazil, and calling this an existential threat, that is, not supporting Ukraine will be an existential threat. Keeping in mind that da Silva has said that arming Ukraine is not helping mediation talks. Calling it an existential situation he says, for Europe and the Netherlands. Is he exaggerating, or is this right on the money?
I think at this moment, of course, Russia doesn't have means or willingness, or maybe there is a willingness, definitely doesn't have means to attack any NATO or EU country. But the fact is, I am from Slovakia. Ukraine is my neighbor. And I think that it's very important to support Ukraine. And on one hand, I understand what President Lula is saying. I think any kind of, let's say, initiative that might lead to some meaningful negotiation is very welcome. But as I said before on your program, I think that all those people who are saying that we need peace, they should be also aware of the fact that most of them, in fact, are just trying to curb Russia. But they shouldn't forget about Ukraine. Ukraine isn't a victim here. And I think that they definitely should talk to Ukraine what kind of peace Ukraine wants, because I think that it's very clear that the war of aggression from Russia is an illegal act. I think this is something. It's hard for me to imagine why would somebody think differently. And Russia is waging the war. Ukraine is defending the country and trying to liberate the occupied territories. And according to international law, according to Charter of the United Nations, Ukraine has every right to ask for help, and other countries have every right to support Ukraine, also by military means. So if Mr. Lula and the others are talking about peace, I would encourage them, please also to talk to, first of all, to Kyiv, what kind of peace is Kyiv envisioning, and maybe we can then move from there.
Finally, this brings to my mind 440 days to today has been what's spent on this conflict, and the civilian casualties in Ukraine, according to the United Nations, is in the thousands, not to speak of the military casualties, even on both sides. But finally, in Slovakia, where you are, I'd like to ask you what the feeling is and the posture amongst the people at this juncture about this war.
Look, as I said, I think that we should support Ukraine as much as possible, which the current government is doing. In fact, we have sent some anti-aircraft systems S-300, also a couple of older MiGs and other military means. On the other hand, it must be said there is a quite widespread pro-Russian sentiment. Not in a real sense that some Slovaks, of course, there's also some Slovaks who would like to see Russia's victories, but most of them would like to see, let's say, peace, no matter what. But I think this is a bit of understandable reactions to the war. We will see how the war will evolve. As you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, we are all expecting the counteroffensive from Ukraine. Maybe the counteroffensive is already in the move. Don't forget that this is not going to be that we are going to see a big speech from President Zelensky. Now we are starting. This is not how it works. In fact, this is a step-by-step approach. So I think that we will see in the next couple of weeks, months, probably how the war will evolve, if Ukraine will be able to push Russia or not, or if Russia will be able to defend the territory they occupied and maybe to move forward. I think the front line is quite long, and there are no guarantees for any of the sides who are fighting at this moment. So, for example, the Czech president, Mr. Pavel, said to their Ukrainian counterparts that they shouldn't rush into the offensive, which I would agree with him. Of course, he's a very, very skillful guy who was also a chief of military committee of NATO. On the other hand, if you go to war, the outcome is never guaranteed. So we will see in the next few weeks, months, how the war will evolve, if Ukraine will be able to get some success from the counteroffensive. But I'm afraid that the war will be quite long. This is not the end. Even if Ukraine is somehow successful, don't forget, if you have been talking at the beginning about the Second World War, D-Day 1944, it still took more than almost a year to beat Nazi Germany. So unfortunately, I think we are in a very long and a prolonged conflict.
That's a grave proposition. We hope that there's minimal loss of life and collateral damage and casualties in this enterprise. Thank you so much for your thoughts on the issue, Mr. Andrej Matisek, the deputy head of Foreign Desk, Pravda newspaper, Bratislava in Slovakia. Thank you so much for making out the time to be with us this morning.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
Now, after the break, drone shows grain ships anchored off Istanbul as Ukraine accuses Russia of halting the deal. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back to our special coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. A bus converted into a makeshift ambulance and manned by volunteer medics carries Ukraine's wounded troops away from the frontline battles in the country's east. Amongst the crew is Ukrainian Tatiana, who had been living in Britain for the past 20 years but returned home to help out after Russia invaded last year. Now, it's a she took unpaid leave to travel to Ukraine, where she joined people in hospital, the medical battalion, which evacuates wounded troops to hospitals away from the battlefront. The bus named Avstrika bus after the military corps sign of an Austrian volunteer who worked on a similar coach before she was killed in a traffic accident, evacuated 6 soldiers, mostly from Bakhmut on Monday. The battle for Bakhmut has been one of the bloodiest of the 14-month war, drawing comparisons with World War I due to massive casualties on both sides. The Hospitallers Initiative, as it's called, involves teams of volunteers rotating and spending several weeks on call, ready for when soldiers need moving further from the front line. Now, the ambulance bus project is part of a wider network of evacuation teams in Ukraine, linking soldiers in trenches to small teams in rear positions. Russia has effectively stopped the Black Sea grain deal by refusing to register incoming vessels. That's according to Ukraine's Reconstruction Ministry, which added that 90 ships, including 62 vessels for loading, were waiting in Turkey's territorial waters for approval to go to Ukrainian ports. Ukrainian Black Sea ports were blockaded after Russia's invasion last year, but access to 3 of them was cleared last July under a deal between Moscow and Kyiv that was brokered by the United Nations and Turkey. The deal expires on May the 18th. Moscow has threatened to quit the agreement intended to help ease the global food crisis. Turkey and the United Nations are working to extend the deal. Now, in a Stalinist skyscraper, which dominates the skyline of Latvia's capital, dozens of elderly Russians wait to take a basic Latvian language test as a proof of loyalty to a country where they've lived for decades. Clutching red Russian passports, the participants, mostly women, read their notes for last-minute revision, fearing they may be expelled from the Baltic country if they fail. Speaking Russian instead of Latvian has not been a problem until now, but the war in Ukraine changed the picture. Last year's election campaign was dominated by questions of national identity and security concerns. The government now demands a language test from the 20,000 people in the country holding Russian passports, mostly elderly and female, as the loyalty of Russian citizens is a worry, said Dmitris Trofimovs, a state secretary at the Interior Ministry. Now, there was a crushed Soviet World War II monument that is now working towards eliminating education in Russian. This has left many Latvians, ethnic Russians, who make up about a quarter of its population of 1.9 million, feeling they may be losing their place in society, where speaking solely Russian has been acceptable for decades.
So it's very simple conversation. It's about I would like to have a dinner and I would like to choose a fish, not a meat. Or my name is Lena and I would like to go to the London. And these kind of sentences just even not related to the process of application or whatever in these terms. It's about the daily life. You just have an activities on your routine.
If we make the difference between emotions and legal regulation, we understand. If you are citizen of another state, you are under protection, also under social protection and other kind of protection of another state. If you want to be and want to reside in other state, you have to be in compliance with immigration law.
A Ukrainian military drone caught the moment a shell exploded in the Ukrainian-held western part of Bakhmut, as footage shows. The eastern town is the focus of heavy fighting between Russian forces and Ukrainian troops. The video also showed damaged buildings and heavy plumes of smoke rising over the city. Moscow stepped up attacks on Ukraine while preparing for its May the 9th Victory Day celebration, marking the anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945. Now we're pleased to have Dr. Dakpa Thomas, expert on international relations theory, Lagos State University, joining us from Lagos. It's good to have you on the program this morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Let's begin with what I see it as a story of bravery. In the midst of conflicts such as this, there are people that rise to the occasion and do what is unprecedented, such as this woman that we just reported on. Her name is Tetiana, an anesthesiologist who left Britain, where she'd been living for 20 years, to help after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as we just reported. And it reminds me of Florence Nightingale in history, who was helping to treat people in a war who were injured and the sick and the infirm. But this is happening at great risk to their lives. Do you think that such volunteers should be allowed to enter the theater of war, and they should rather turn to professionals who've been trained to do this?
Well, I don't understand what you mean by should they be allowed to enter into the theater of war. Ordinarily, it's their decision, it's their personal decision. And I think these are people who really feel that whether it's in a war situation, there must be some people that will cater for the injured, those who are injured, and then those who are victims of the war, either sustaining serious injuries and everything. That's why you have Red Cross all over. You know, now I think that the question you should have framed, the way you should have framed it, is whether we should have a corridor, you know, whether we should have a corridor that we should respect during war, that we should respect for this kind of people so that they can freely operate. These are people who are volunteered and have come from a very long distance to come and render help, medical help, as you have put it. And now you have a situation where Russia is bombing a warehouse that the Red Cross has been using, just with deliveries of aids, with medical aids and everything, you know, medical aid and all sorts of things which they are going to use to help revive those who are almost giving up or those who are almost dying during the war. So what we should be talking about is people respecting human values, the values, you know, human values, even in moments of war. But we have a situation where Russia seems to believe that anything goes in war. No. Humanity is something that is prevalent. Humanity is something that everybody, we are all part of the humanity, and we should believe that humanitarian gestures, we should appreciate humanitarianism. We should not just believe that anything goes in war and then you start destroying, you start killing children, you start killing pregnant women, you start killing elderly ones. I mean, there should be some decorum. There should be some decorum. There should be a way that a corridor should be created for this kind of people so that at least their efforts will not be in vain. You can imagine somebody coming from Britain, coming from Ireland, coming from US to come and help. Not joining the troops now, not fighting the war, but just to help those who are injured. And you know, Red Cross and this kind of people are not just helping Ukrainians. I mean, injured Ukrainians. They are helping anybody, even any soldier, anybody who is in the war front. Well, for as long as you are injured, these are the people that help. It's not that they have come to help only Ukrainians. No. So they should not just only be allowed to enter theaters of war. They should also be given a corridor to operate freely so that at least their expertise, which they have come to bring into play, would be appreciated for the purpose of humanity and everything. So I think it's a laudable It's a laudable initiative on the part
Dr.
of the
Thomas, I totally agree with
Yes.
you. That's why at the beginning of the question, which I think I correctly framed, it was a commendable gesture and it's an act of bravery. That's what I called it. But you know that the army have medical personnel who are part of the army, the medical doctors, the people who are trained to be on the field to evacuate soldiers who've suffered injuries. And you also know that there are professionals who are trained, professional volunteers who are trained in this endeavor to try and help people who need help on the field of battle. And the reason I raise that is because if anybody just gung-ho comes from their country to say they want to help, they may actually even get in the way of the efforts of the Ukrainians or even the Russians, if that may be the case.
I agree with you.
The measure you talked about, having a corridor for them to work freely, is a very good idea.
I really agree with you because, but I believe that both countries, whether Russia, whether Ukraine, should have a way of accommodating them. They know those who are really for the war, their own personnel. They know their own medical personnel. So all these volunteers to have a way of being integrated or accommodated into this particular purpose, for this particular purpose. I quite agree with you. And they make provision for them. They make provision for them. They are listed. They know them. Once they come, they know where to go. They don't just come to the war. They go to established places where they can be registered, and everybody takes note of them. So it's not just that they just come to the war and then start performing anonymously.
Right. Now, the Wagner chief has said that they are beginning to receive, after complaining vehemently in his public Telegram channel that he wasn't getting enough ammunition, has said he's begun to receive ammunition. And we know that they're mercenaries, but they're also conscripted soldiers on the Russian side. I would have loved to pose this question to someone with a military background, but I know that you can also give us your opinion on this. Now, the Red Army, the Soviet Union's army, was mainly made of conscripted Soviet Union citizens of not just Russian descent, but other nations around Russia, maybe even Ukrainians who are part of the Red Army. And because, as one of our guests last week pointed out, that when you use conscripted soldiers, they don't have obviously the kind of experience that a real army has. So they expend a lot of ammunition. You may suffer a lot of casualties, and that's why it's been opined that's why maybe the Soviet army lost a lot of people in their campaign against Nazi Germany. But if you were a military commander, who would you rather command, a conscripted soldier or a mercenary?
Well, they have their roles. They have different roles. The regular army will play their role, and then the mercenaries will play their role. I believe that Russia was just being cautious of the fact that, look, this group is run by a specialist in this kind of he's a professional mercenary, and there must be some inventory, of the ammunition that is being supplied to him, because don't forget, as a professional, he has the capacity, or he has he is at liberty. He is at liberty to conserve or to just hide some of the ammunition being given to him for future purposes, and then to use somewhere else. They don't have to be buying ammunition and everything, so they can hold on to some of this ammunition. I believe that for proper inventory, that's why Russia has been slow in giving out the ammunition to him, despite the fact that they know that he's sacrificing a lot. And his own something is also different. He can recruit. He can recruit at will. and mostly prisoners, mostly rebels from different countries and all sorts. So the regular army, they have their own. And, he is at liberty he is free. He can play with the lives of the soldiers anyhow, because they are mercenaries. So nobody is taking note of their life. Nobody bothers about them. They have no homes. They don't have people. They don't have parents. They don't have anybody. Even if they have parents, nobody. For you to have gone into this kind of Wagner group thing, you must be somebody who is at liberty to do whatever he likes. So they don't care. So that's why they fight mercilessly. They are mercenaries, so they fight mercilessly. For the regular army, the government is very careful not to be exposing their children, because these are people that you will take account. You have to account for them, and then they have parents, they have people, so they are watching. And it is once you start having high rate of casualties in any war situation, then the people at home will definitely be asking you questions about the lives that you have put online. But for mercenaries, that's why there is a bit of calm in Russia now, because most of their children are playing the back row, the regular army. So they are playing the back row. They are not exposed like that. So it's the Wagner mercenaries that are now exposed, because nobody is taking inventory of their lives. So there will be conflict. There will be conflict. And what Prigozhin is saying is not something that is new. That there are some people sitting down in their different offices and enjoying the spoils of war, while people are sacrificing, while he has littered bodies all over the place and everything. That's not new. He can afford to sacrifice the lives of his own soldiers, because there is nobody that is taking inventory of their lives. So, but the regular army, they have to be very careful. Otherwise, it will cause a kind of chaos or some kind of uproar, and uprising in Russia.
Finally, Dr. Thomas, there's an interesting consequence of this war that has been brewing, that's happening, concerning the language of Russian that has been spoken by ethnic Russians in Latvia, who we just reported on, where the government of the day is saying that they want their people to speak Latvian and not Russian. Now, there are many Ukrainians who speak Russian, and they're beginning to encourage the people not to speak Russian, but to speak Ukrainian. And taking into account that Russian is the language that they've been using. They use it to apply for work. They use it in places of business in Ukraine. But now, obviously, because of how bitter the Ukrainians are, obviously, and those that support Ukraine, who speak Russian, they don't want to speak Russian anymore. Should the governments compel their citizens to stop speaking Russian?
Well, I don't think they are going to compel them to stop speaking Russian. The only thing they could do is just to encourage them to speak their own native language, and then they should find a way to make Ukrainian or Latvian the popular language that will be spoken officially all over, in their institutions, in their establishments, everywhere. All you can do is just to upgrade. All you can do is just to elevate your own ethnic language or your own national language above the Russian language. The sentiment is still there that all these nations, Latvia and Co, and most of the Balkan states, and then some of the Eastern European states, were part of Russia before, Soviet Union. And for oneness, because it was a federation. So for oneness and for everything, they willingly, this thing has been on since, particularly between Ukraine and Russia. They have always been having this kind of situation. And it's very difficult for anybody to say that, don't speak Russia, that you have been speaking for almost 30 years or 40 years. I'm so sure the elderly ones in Ukraine would be used to Russian. But however, it's not that they are forgetting their own native language. So the best thing is just to elevate your own language officially. You make provision for it officially. So not that there is no way you can prescribe a particular language. You just reduce it to just like Nigeria. You speak your language, and then you speak English rather as official language, and then you speak Pidgin English. You speak Pidgin as a common language. So you can reduce Russian in your own enclave, in your own society, in your own country. You can reduce Russia to Pidgin, and then you elevate your language to the English, or maybe to, above Russian.
Well, the message we all hope to hear in any language in this case is an end to the war in a fair and just manner. Thank you so much, Dr. Dakwa Thomas, expert on international relations, Lagos State University, for coming on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, Ukraine train for championship. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back to our special coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine, and for which now we turn to how business is affected around the world by this conflict. And Ladi Williams is in the studio with us to give us that perspective. Ladi, now,
good to be
here. Good to see you as usual. Now, Russian oil is
getting all the attention.
Is a big deal now, especially for Pakistan, who are beginning to purchase it.
Yeah, that's what you get.
Is it cheaper for them?
Oh yes, it's cheaper because we know with the sanctions, on Russian oil, at this time we've seen that price cap about $60. Even though we see, in the global oil markets, we see that price already. That's the price of Brent and WTI, tending towards that $60 range. So they might have to, bring that cap even lower. Talking about the EU with the sanctions on Russian oil. Yeah. But at the end of the day, they've been selling, way below that. Talking about Russian oil, and we've seen China and India. They've been big buyers, of that oil at this time. That's Russian oil because obviously it's cheaper. It's basic economics. Once price, goes down, demand, increases. So we're seeing other, countries, looking at buying, keen into this cheap Russian oil at this time.
There's nothing OPEC can do about it.
So yeah, OPEC, they can do, what they can because at the end of the day, OPEC, we've seen OPEC sales to countries like China that has actually gone down in India because of what they're getting from Russia. At this time. So, we definitely know OPEC is, trying to see how they can, close all of that. But at the end of the day, it's an independent body and it's their member, still Russia remains their member.
Because OPEC wants to sell oil at the highest.
So OPEC
for the highest it can.
OPEC is still going to sell oil at their price, and they're still trying to even cut production to see how they can raise oil prices to stay, around that $80 level. But at the end of the day, Russia is a different, kettle of fish. They're having to deal with sanctions at this time. So they have the price cap, on their oil. So at the end of the day, they're allowed to sell as long as they're getting the demand from countries like, China and India. So now, Pakistan is looking at getting that oil because the country is struggling, right now. They import about 85% of their energy from Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So at the end of the day, they've looked at it that if we're going to get cheap oil from Russia, we're going to buy from them. But we still have the risk of, secondary sanctions, going forward at this time.
We know that Nigeria has not adopted a hardline stance against Russia, internationally, diplomatically speaking, but the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is urging, as you've pointed out, Nigeria and others to take over the Russian oil markets.
Yes, and most of those
realistic
commodities
proposition.
It's a good advice because at the end of the day, we've not been able to enjoy the record highs we saw in oil markets last year. So Brent got to about almost $140 per barrel last year, but our production couldn't even match that, so we didn't enjoy that windfall. So at the end of the day, our production is, inching up this year. We got to about 1.3 million barrels per day. Did touch 1.6, but we're seeing another downtrend with that. Obviously, with the battle against oil theft seems to be winning, at this time. So we're seeing our production, inch up, even though we're not at our specified quota, yet. So at the end of the day, it's a good advice. It would be nice to take advantage of these prices, even though they're coming down at this time, and we do have that benchmark. Yeah. It's getting really close to it. So it's a wise thing to do at this time. Ramp up, production. Increase your output. So that you can take advantage of the prices at this time. So these countries in Africa, we have the opportunity, to actually do that now. Even though, these countries have their issues, domestically, we're still struggling with our refineries, here and all of that. But it's a good advice, and hopefully, these countries like Angola, Nigeria, and Ghana can actually, key into these markets because it's a big market.
Yeah, I expect so. And it may or may not be taking more business news across the board on Business Morning with Laddie Williams after this program. Thank you, Laddie.
Thank you.
Finally, World Athletics, the governing body for track and field, says dozens of Ukrainian athletes and the officials preparing for the World Championships in August can get funding for training camps. The body will invest $190,000 and prioritize replacing equipment for pole vaulters, the event of Ukrainian great Sergei Bubka, destroyed in Russian missile attacks. A college in Bakhmut named after Bubka, who is now a senior vice president of World Athletics, was part of a sports complex, including a track stadium, an indoor arena destroyed during fierce fighting there in recent months. It was only the center where athletes could conduct training camps at any time of the year. World Athletics President Sebastian Coe pledged ahead of the August 19th to 27th championships in Budapest, Hungary, to do, quote, whatever we can to help athletics survive and recover in Ukraine. That's where we leave it for today's special coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Olumide Macaulay. Please join us again tomorrow for a new edition.